Right now, there's a traffic jam of sorts on Georgia's coast. Ports in Savannah are overloaded with cargo, and the Georgia Ports Authority says they can't get anyone to pick it up. They're pointing to retailers who can't find truckers to go out and get the goods. The White House recently announced plans to work with major retailers to make sure those backups don't impact your holiday shipping. Joining me now is Chuck Todd, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. Good morning, Chuck.
Well, good morning, Christy.
Let's dig into this supply chain issue right now. They are creating huge backups at ports across the country. We're feeling the pain here at our port in Savannah. That has ships anchored off the coast waiting to be unloaded. But the ports say it's actually the retailers and the lack of truckers that's the real issue here. And you know this is only going to ramp up as the holiday shopping season comes into play. You've got Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg on today. How much pressure is he and the Biden administration under to come up with a solution?
I think they're feeling a ton of pressure because, as you know, even though you could argue that presidents get too much credit for a good economy and too much blame for a bad economy, that's the problem, right? An economy that right now this is an awkward economy. We have plenty of jobs that are available. This isn't a crisis on employment, but we also have rising inflation. And so you put those two things together, and it's an uncomfortable spot that we're in. The supply chain issue, you know, it's part of our labor shortage issue. We've had a truck driver shortage since pre-COVID. COVID's made it worse. A lot more truckers decided to retire. And so there's fewer drivers at this point. One of the questions I'll have for the secretary is that where the federal government needs to intervene? You know, the state of Massachusetts called up its National Guard recently in order to deal with a school bus driver shortage that they had, and they trained up National Guard for that. There's some people calling for the U.S. Navy to be helping unloading at ports, and maybe call up the National Guard and get them to become the long-haul truckers temporarily, at least as we get closer to Christmas season. So I think those are some of the issues the federal government's thinking about, but I think they had no choice but to basically get caught trying to do something about this issue.
Right, as they're all headed to 24/7 operations, that is certainly an interesting question to ask. All right, so early voting now underway here in Atlanta for the mayor's race and some other local races, and we've seen a lot of activists speaking up about the importance of getting to the polls. Do you think that message is hitting people differently after what we saw in November of 2020? I mean, do you anticipate more turnout in these smaller local races?
That is what I'm looking for. Right now, I don't. Right now, if you look at the overall political environment, where a majority of the country thinks we're headed in the wrong direction, you look at it locally, and I think people will even say that most of the time about their local, about how things are going locally, right? There's just a lot of, there's pent-up frustration over COVID. You throw in the economic anxiety that people have and our toxic politics. So does it demoralize people? And they decide, boy, you know, it doesn't really matter, government's too dysfunctional to work? Or does it motivate people? And, you know, I have seen some evidence right now. I've not seen a lot of evidence that we are going to see surging turnouts. We'll find out what happens. We got a statewide race in Virginia that will be a bit of a bellwether. You brought up these mayor's races. We have quite a few of them around the country in some major cities. There's going to be new mayors in Atlanta, Boston, New York, Cleveland, all in the next 3 months. You would assume that should spark more turnout. But I'm skeptical because of the pall, I think, that's hanging over the country right now.
All right, Chuck, thanks. Meet the Press airs at 10, right after 11 Alive weekend mornings here on 11 Alive.